All right, so been talking about deviance the past couple times, and what is deviance and so on and so forth. But there does come a point where deviance is a threat to a society, a legitimate threat to a society, and society is going to do something about it. And this is where we get the labels of crime and, by extension, punishment. Um, so, yeah. So, what is a crime? Crime is a violation of a cultural norm that is codified into law. Um, so again, some little trivia. There's actually 4,000 acts that are classified as federal crimes, and many more acts violate state, local statutes, those types of things. But again, these are again often we don't really think about it because hopefully we're not all a bunch of criminals, but these are again, remember back to you had the norms, the mores, the taboos, and um, laws. A crime is really something that violates a norm that has been made into a law. So, with that, we have the criminal justice system. And with the criminal justice system, again, what really just exists from a sociological standpoint, it only exists to deal with the violations of those norms. Like for murder, you go off, you slaughter a bunch of orphans at an orphanarium. Um, Futurama joke. Um, you know, Murder is a violation of a norm within our society. So this is we have the criminal justice system. What they do is it deals with those violations, ranging from the police that arrest you to the courts that try you to the correctional system that in essence just deals with the aftermath of you or me or Guido the axe murderer violating the norms of the society. So these are kind of the four ways of controlling and punishing lawbreakers. First, you have the idea of deterrence, where you have the threat of punishment to discourage a criminal action. So, things like the death penalty, publishing the laws, the different violations, the news that reports when, something happens. Um, the idea that the punishment is out there and you won't risk committing that crime because the punishment's so severe. You know, the idea of, you're not going to get, have a little one too many Coronas and jump in a car, drink while drunk, and then, you know, kill somebody. There are heavy consequences that go with that. Um, and then on top of that, convicted criminals, like when somebody does violate it, they serve it as an example to keep others, to keep other people in line. Then you have the idea of retribution, which makes criminals pay compensation for their acts. This is kind of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mindset, where law is designed to allow officials to demand retribution from criminals. The punishment. You did something bad, we are going to make you pay for it. Now, here's kind of the caveat though. The individual that is personally harmed, they do not take personal vengeance. What happens is the state, the government, serving as kind of the arbiter and the judge and all that other good stuff, they're the ones that mete out the punishment. So, like, for example, if somebody breaks into your house and kills your mother tonight, it would be wrong for you to track them down and murder their mother. Because you go to jail for that. Now, what the state would do is they would step in and they would go, okay, well, you killed this one person, conceivably. We're going to kill you. Um, so that's kind of the idea of retribution. Then you have the idea of incarceration. This is keeping criminals in prison. And really the idea is this. Criminals who are not on the streets cannot commit the crimes. And this is the idea where you take people who are, stereotypically the violent offender. That is too dangerous to be kind of released in the general public, so they're isolated from the rest of the public in order to keep the public safe. That's really what that is all about. And then lastly, you have the idea of rehabilitation, where somebody that is, made did a crime, they go to a more rehabilitative thing. The idea is to take that criminal and enable them to re-socialize back into society and not go off and commit that same crime again. And again, this is made up of a bunch of programs aimed at giving prisoners both maybe social or work skills that will help them adjust to a normal society. Um, like for example, my first teaching job was the prison. Had a lot of kids younger than you guys. Um, I was technically the middle school teacher, but I went all the way down to elementary. One kid in particular, and I always remember him. I called him Little Mike Tyson. He, yeah, he was in jail. He was in fourth grade because he practically beat his mom to death. Yeah. Um, he, I watched him sucker punch my principal. Really came out of the blue. I was shocked by that happen. Then he went to another facility where he tried to strangle another teacher. But really, the way that his case managers were dealing with him was to try to teach him skills that mainly social skills so he wouldn't be in those types of situations. How to express your anger or frustration with words and not your fists, for example. Or, basically the thing that they were really trying to teach him was it's not okay to hit women. But that was kind of the idea. That was the house that he was raised in, where his dad beat his mom. Well, he grew up and beat his mom. So they were trying to re-socialize and retrain him to kind of better fit into the norms of society. And the idea for this is there's other options that are there. And the reason why we have these other options is because of recidivism, if I pronounce that right. And really, it's kind of this. More than half of those released from penal institutions are sent back to prison in 3 to 5 years. Again, when I taught at the jail, I had a couple come back. Like, one was literally released, and 2 weeks later, he was back. And, yeah. So, kind of because of this, they have options. So it's like kind of a combination of prison and probation. Um, is one way where it's like a split sentence, kind of shock probation. Kind of the idea is this: someone does something bad, they go to jail, and then they're put on probation. But it's like a short term jail. It's kind of like one of those scared straight things where they take maybe like a little high schooler, middle schooler who wants to be a gangbanger or something like that, and then they take him, put him around real gangbangers, and those real gangbangers scare the crap out of them. Um, that kind of thing. Um, Community-based programs. The idea is pretty much getting convicts out of prison. Kind of breaks the inmate code a little bit. Best way to kind of describe that was sometimes called the G code when I dealt with it. But the kind of the idea is, yeah, you do have prison gangs and stuff like that. And what happens is a lot of people who do end up in a jail, and again, I've seen this play out firsthand, where somebody will go to jail and the jail will actually make them worse because they get kind of put into another group and they pick up the norms of the prison group and they become part of that society and they can't really totally integrate back into normal society. So so what happens is it's kind of like an in and out thing where yeah, they'll probably be held in a facility, but what happens is they put them back into society, um, in the community. Usually volunteer work hours are involved or something like that. So they're put back into the community under professional guidance, counselor, therapist, police, doesn't matter. Depends on the program, but um, but the idea is the community, they're back out in the community, but they're under the guidance of somebody who can kind of guide them through it. So that way, if they do end up in certain pitfalls again, it doesn't happen again. And then they have a diversion strategy as well, um, where kind of offenders are handled outside the formal system. Um, so they don't end up with records or stuff like that. Like, for example, there's one story that I knew where, or actually involved a coworker, when he was a student. Um, yeah, he streaked during lunch. He stripped down, butt naked, ran through the whole cafeteria. Well, that's like, that's technically a sexual crime. You go to jail for that kind of stuff. Public indecency, public lewdness. There's a whole gamut of things you could be charged with for running butt naked through a school cafeteria. People are 15, congratulations. Underage stuff factors in now. So yeah. So what happened to him, was pretty much the school cop and his football coach, instead of pressing charges or anything like that, they made him refund everything he had eaten in the past 48 hours. Yes, there was vomit. Lots of vomit. And he was sore for about a week. And if somebody on the football team, you know what I'm talking about. Those little punishments that coaches whip up. Some other little methods and these kind of factor into the others, but these are kind of specific strategies. First is kind of a restitution. It's a payment made by the offender to the victim. Again, usually this is done with the government serving as the middleman. Those types of things. Somebody, yeah, they steal something, they have to return it or pay, the cost of it or something like that. Usually this is done by court order, and usually the court is the middleman in all this. Community service: offenders perform a certain number of hours of service beneficial to the community to kind of pay back their debts. Another thing is education. Education opportunities available to many that are incarcerated. And again, these can be skill-based, so that way they can have a job. These can be social-based, learn social skills or those types of things. And then therapy. And again, this is drug rehabilitation. These can happen while they're incarcerated or happen when they're not incarcerated. Like a lot of people, AA, that kind of stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody, they get a bunch of speeding tickets for, driving while drunk. Instead of, going to jail, the judge sends them to Alcoholics Anonymous. Those types of things. It really it just depends on the case and the judge and where you live and so many variables. I cannot give specifics really. So this is just kind of an overview of the different ways that society deals with that level of deviancy to where society now kind of deems them as a threat to society and they have to be dealt with in some shape, form, or fashion. And again, this is not always a violent thing. Again, people that steal things, people that, you know, people like Bernie Madoff who like embezzled millions of dollars, those types of things. Pretty much the idea is this: if somebody violates the norms that damages somebody, either physically, mentally, psychologically, whatever, these are these are some of the tools that all societies have at their disposal to set things right. Again, in the United States, you just miss a bunch of school or you shoplift or something, yeah, community service. If you lived in Mao's China during the height of the Cultural Revolution, and you were someone who said, you know what, I really don't care for what Mao Zedong is doing. He's kind of nuts, and millions of people are dying. Well, they had community service too. There was a story, there's many stories actually, of people that were dissidents to the norms that Mao was wanting to put in place, and they actually had to go on apology tours where they would go around the whole country of China apologizing that were dissidents to what the communist government was seeking to do. Um, so these are things that every society has. Specifics can show up in many different ways. And that's something that you guys will look at a little bit later after this. All right, so I'll see you next time. Peace out. Deuces. All the other good stuff.